All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dispersing the Fog. This is December 14th, 2025, getting close to Christmas, but this is episode 40, Paul.
40.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're
I
getting into
remember
our
when I
40s.
remember when I was 40. Yeah.
Slight athletic decline, but probably better intellectually. We'll see how this goes into our 40s here.
Well, the thing is, I've said before, people who retire when they're 55,
Yeah,
it's like the dumbest thing ever. That's when you're the smartest and you understand how to do everything.
yeah.
And then you start rotting after that. You golf for a year or two and then gone.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. I think I've still, you know, I'm still getting there, but not too long away. Paul, we got a great show tonight. We've got Dave Moore coming back to talk to us. He's not following up on the Glen Assoun stuff, which could have, probably occupied a few shows, but he has another situation, and it's pretty interesting. He sent some notes this week, and so we're looking forward to getting Dave Moore back. He's on
Well,
another
it sort of
case.
follows from the Glen Assoun wrongful conviction case.
Yeah.
It's all related.
Yeah, it's so we'll let Dave get into that. We have a few follow-up stories, and then there's new justice legislation. Geez, some chaos in the not chaos in the federal political scene this week. Another floor crosser from the conservatives. All these things are taking up the news cycles. But in the middle of all this, Paul, there's been some new justice legislation by Justice Minister Sean Fraser's introduced. Bill C-16, we'll get into that, but some good and bad elements that I want to talk about. But before that, we have a few follow-up stories that we've been covering. And maybe let's start with the National Police Federation came out with a comment on the YVR uh, OPP, the Ontario Provincial Police report on the Robert Chikansky, follow up the four officers that were charged. And they came out pretty hard against the RCMP. So, Paul, do we need to not apologize to our old foes, the National Police Federation, but do we need to compliment them for what they've done this week?
It would be very difficult for me to compliment them. We've spent three shows on this in the last sort of month, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. The investigation into how the four officers involved in the killing of Robert Discansky at Vancouver Airport in 2007 were basically made scapegoats, and an OPP report said that. The OPP report came out a month ago.
Yeah.
We've had it on here. We've had discussions. We've had Kurt Petrovic on talking about it. There's been one media story in CTV by on CTV in Vancouver by John Woodward, and everything else has been crickets. So now the NPF comes out the other day, what, Thursday, Friday,
Yeah.
and puts out this report, a missive uh, acknowledging the mistreatment, scapegoating, and the complete absence of support from the RCMP for these four experienced officers. Whoa, this is tough.
Strong language, like talks about gross mismanagement at the senior levels of RCMP. Like this is strong language from Brian Sauvé, the head of the MPF, who for people that haven't followed along for all of our shows, we were very critical of Brian Sauvé at the Mass Casualty Commission and the stance that the National Police Federation took there and in other instances since. So this is a seems like a turn, maybe.
No, at the Mass Casualty Commission, what we learned in it, I showed in my book, Anatomy of a Cover-Up. Sauvé was behind a number of clear fabrications. Talking about the textbook response of the RCMP, telling people to move on, the not investigating the shooting of Heidi Stevenson and seeing what really happened, instead trying to make it look like Heidi Stevenson had a gun battle that never happened. This is Brian Sauvé,
Yeah.
like basically fabricating things. And now he puts out this statement, and it's been widely ignored by the media so far. maybe he's lost credibility finally. I doubt it. The media is just so lazy. But I asked Monty Robinson, one of the four YVR officers who went to jail for perjury. One of two who went to jail, and the other two were exonerated. We went through this with Kurt Petrovich. And I asked Monty, like, why did Sauvé do this? And he said, well, one of the reasons was I was writing him letters telling him he better say something. RCMP members are out there going, well, wait a second. These guys were largely exonerated. They were scapegoated for a difficult situation. What happens if I get in trouble? Who's there to defend me? I mean, this is a morale issue now. Monty said, that's part of it. He said, unfortunately, a lot of members would not have read the 281-page report, but they will read the NPF union media statement. The majority of members are like most people and just want the Coles Notes version, which the NPF has now provided. After reading this statement, more members will likely read the report. What has been documented should worry members. And I think that's what's going on here. But it had nothing to do with Sauvé, getting behind these Mounties. As Monty points out, the RCMP National Police Federation didn't stand behind me. I had to write letters to them, and I emailed the NPF this morning to push him to make a statement. He was pushing them to make a statement, and then they
Interesting. Huh?
did. So it's not like they sort of stepped up to the plate willingly. I think there are all kinds of forces at work here.
Well, and then you mentioned it was released late in the week, close to Christmas, not at the height of the news cycle when the report first came out. I mean, that was the time to say something meaningful, not a month later, more than a
Yeah,
month.
a month later, they're saying, and
Mm.
and the RCMP had this report since September. They have said nothing, and we talked about this in previous shows.
Yeah. So interesting that anyway, Monty Robinson, he's seems like a force in all of this, making things happen. It'll be interesting to see now. I mean, in a way, not surprising for Brian Sauvé to be saying this. He's defending the officers against management, but anyway, we'll see if more officers read it and if that has any effect.
I think more and more are going to, it's the kind of thing people are going to say. Did you see what happened to those YBR guys that everyone thought they killed Robert Diskansky and they lied and two of them went to jail and they're horrible human beings? And this OPP report, which is pretty good, not perfect, says exactly the opposite. They were following their training. They did what they thought was right. They had misleading information about the tasers. And now the ordinary members have got to say, I'm in a bad situation. Geez, should I do anything here or should I just walk away?
Yeah.
Because the force is not going to defend me. I think this is like a poison that's going to go through the force.
Well, we'll certainly be watching for that and to see if there's any other reactions. I'm with you, Paul. I'm very curious as to why there has not been more media coverage of this. Like one story from CTV Vancouver. Like, where is everybody else? It's bizarre.
You
Uh,
know,
yeah,
the media is so bad that and so entrenched, um, and so stubborn. They will not, when they publish something, they say that's the record. That's our version of the story. We stand behind it, and they will not usually correct or alter or especially if it has to deal with, the context of the story. They never want to get into it because then they have to rewrite history. I mean, if the media admits that the YVR guys were scapegoats, then they have to explain all their reporting going back to 2008 and 7 saying the opposite.
all right. Another story we covered here, Paul, and there was a well, significant follow-up activity this week was the letter that Nova Scotia Justice Minister Scott Armstrong sent out to the 13 Mi'kmaq chiefs in Nova Scotia and published, made it public, talking about illegal, in the government's mind, cannabis sales on reserves. There's 51 NSLC outlets. There's over 100 outlets on reserves across the province. The follow-up to this has been that Justice Minister Armstrong, Premier Tim Houston, and LNU Affairs Minister Leah Martin, who is Mi'kmaq herself, part of government MLA and minister, have been banned from the Sebeganegedy Reserve, which where Chief Michelle Glasgow announced that the three of them, three provincial politicians, are banned from the reserve, and didn't answer any follow-up questions. I would have been curious if somebody had asked about this part where it was near the end of the letter, she says, for our safety and theirs. Was this a threat to the premier, Paul? Uh,
Yeah, probably. I mean,
mm,
the sort of the whole indigenous issue is, as you know, is fraught with all kinds of problems, but not the least being the amount of violent behavior in these areas and on many of these First Nations reserves. It's very dangerous because of not only because of the people who are there, but the outsiders coming in there and the ties in various reserves with organized crime. It's like it's a real difficult situation. I feel for the
mm.
people who are just trying to be law-abiding citizens living there because many of these places are not the kind of places you want to be in.
So
So
one might,
yeah, it could be dangerous because there's a lot of yahoos in there, just like there are yahoos in the communities outside the First Nations. I mean,
yeah, you never know. Somebody may take it into their own hands and get offended. And I think in a way this is a negotiating tactic by the First Nations to that they want the revenue from these operations, and they want overall they want to make the point that it's our land and it's up to us. If you want to talk about all of these operations, well, you should have done this years ago and done it in a different way. We're not just going to be told
yeah,
what to do.
yep,
So in the meantime, Premier Houston has met with four Mi'kmaq chiefs, not Chief Glasgow, but others, and has made a claim too that some of the weed that's being sold in these places is laced with fentanyl, and that's one of the reasons why maybe people like it better. But that was anecdotal, not really. Um, but here's maybe the more interesting point, Paul. The RCMP reaction to this has been to say we're not going to change anything we do about policing in Nova Scotia, despite the premier saying that this is, and the justice minister saying he's directing the RCMP to, crack down on this. RCMP has said no, we're going to do the same thing. So is this, could this possibly be uh, what befalls leads to the downfall of the RCMP in Nova Scotia, not listening to the Justice Minister and the Premier on this kind of a directive?
first of all, the first rule of the RCMP is nobody tells the RCMP what to do. But now they're operating as they operate as a contract police force under the laws of Nova Scotia, but they follow federal policies regarding Indigenous people, etc. So they're not dealing with the local issues in a local way. Yeah, you would think that if there's a right thinking, well, not right in the political sense, but um, someone who could look at this objectively, there would be no RCMP as a contract police force. I'm not sure that the current premier buys into that because he seems slavishly addicted to having the RCMP, in spite of all the evidence that it's not the right police force for Nova Scotia or many other provinces.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of good reasons why the RCMP should not be the provincial police force in Nova Scotia. It would be ironic in a way if this sort of improper directive from the government is what leads to it. But
Yeah.
anyway, sometimes the ends justify the means in some cases. I also so just to put a bow on this one, I would encourage people to go to Ashley McIsaac's Facebook page and listen to his rendition of the situation sung to the tune of Silent Night, which was kind of entertaining. So. All right, Paul, I want to talk about Bill C-16, new justice legislation. All right, so what's been getting the media attention because anytime there's a new story, everybody has to find the artificial intelligence angle to it. And in this case, the artificial intelligence angle is that there are deep fake possibilities, and the government is now going to criminalize that if you're doing any kind of deep fake pornography and using some real person's image, that's going to be a problem. That's going to be criminalized. So that's what's gotten the attention. But there's some really interesting things here. Okay, so there's mandatory minimum sentences. All of these mandatory minimum sentences that have been struck down in recent years by the Supreme Court of Canada, the government is going to put in sort of a what they would call a safety valve. So if in a particular case the judge would say, well, the mandatory minimum would be grossly disproportionate, they will now have another option to declare that and then sentence somebody in a different way. All right, so that seems like a good thing. Uh, Delays in the courts are a major issue. And so the government wants to attack that by saying, well, if public safety wouldn't be a problem, maybe some of these cases can go to diversion or other, settlement conferences, that sort of thing. That seems like a good thing and something that may lead to more settlement conferences and more timely things. A hidden major benefit to this legislation, that hasn't been discussed that I've seen, is that records applications in sexual assault cases are being simplified. Right now, Paul, anytime there's a sexual assault case and there's text messages and records, which is basically every case now, you have to do a separate application to get those records to be included as evidence in the case. Well, the government is now saying if the records are between the complainant and the accused, which again is all the time, those records are in automatically. And on the other side, therapeutic records of complainants and alleged victims, those are going to be more difficult to get and only attainable if innocence is at stake. Okay? Uh, so those seem like good things, but there's the problem in this is that coercive control is going to be criminalized, and femicide, the killing of a female intimate partner, is going to be declared. If you kill that situation, it will be first degree murder. It'll be automatically first degree murder, which affects a lot of things, sentencing, of course, and parole eligibility. So, what strikes you among all those things, or what are you thinking?
Well, if you're going to create this is being driven by sort of the ultra extreme feminist wing of the Liberal Party, basically, and Canada. That if you're going to create a different class of murder victim, that sort of goes against the rule of law. Like everyone is equal under the law, but females are not. They get a special status. And as you know, I was reading the letters to the editor of the Globe and Mail on this story the other day. Well, people were saying that what a man kills his wife for whatever reason, and he automatically is going to get a life sentence. But if she kills him, she might get 10 for manslaughter. She'll get a fair trial. Doesn't make sense. I mean, it sounds like it'd just fall apart. No matter what the government says it's going to do, it sounds like it's the kind of, you're the lawyer. It sounds like the kind of thing that it would fall apart in court using that example, basically.
Absolutely. So there's, on the one hand, okay, so if a person kills their wife, all right, first degree murder is premeditated, second degree murder is not. Okay, that's just something you intend to do, but it's spur of the moment. One could argue that if one kills their spouse, that it might seem premeditated, but because of the relationship and the history of it all, in a way, it is premeditated, right? Okay. But here's another problem, Paul. Like now with if it's, coercive control or femicide, instead of just dealing with the situation and bringing in evidence of the offense, now you've got to bring in evidence of the whole relationship. And so think of the time that that's going to add to every single trial of this nature. Because, the Crown's going to bring in, all right, here's the history of the relationship. And here's a bunch of people that can t testify to that. And now the defendant is going to have to say, well, no, that's not the way it was. And here's a lot of evidence that'll, counter that. It's going to add, days and weeks to some of these trials, and that's a big problem.
Well, the other issue, I really have problems with the notion of femicide because I think it's political and it's not rational. I mean, in the Nova Scotia massacres, 22 people were killed. 13 of them were women. And right away we were being told, this is femicide, this is femicide. Geez, well, he shot at a couple of other men. It would have almost been a tie,
Yeah.
13 and 13, if some people had lived. Some people had died who were shot at or missed. It doesn't make sense. It's basically trying to, force everything into these neat little wickets and make people really happy that this is the way things, are going to go. Just don't get it. The other problem is, um, as I said last week, the number of women killed in murdered in Canada is pretty static. It's about, it's about 200 a year. A lot of them are in bad relationships of their own choice. You know, as I said, women have to be taught not to get into bad relationships. Or yeah, they follow it. Men get into bad relationships too. I hate to tell you, with women who are domineering, it happens. And the last point that the feminists have to deal with, the highest percentage incidence of murders of women is in same-sex relationships. So if that's look up the stats.
So
Those are the highest percentage. Those are the most violent relationships, woman-woman relationships. So in those kind of relationships, is the murderer going to get a life sentence for killing the woman? Because that would be femicide by their
it's
own definition.
automatic, wouldn't it? You wouldn't even have to bring in evidence.
Yeah, you wouldn't even have to bring in evidence. I mean, it's insanity.
Yeah, it's interesting. Now the Canadian Civil Liberties Association has come out against this, saying, you know, you're trying to fight delay government. Just put more resources into this. Hire more judges.
Yeah.
Put more courtrooms open. I mean, that's a problem in Nova Scotia and across the country. And so there's pressure on Sean Fraser here. He hasn't had a great track record as immigration minister and housing minister. Now he's in justice. Big portfolio for him. Big piece of new legislation. Everybody, they're describing this in sort of groundbreaking generational terms in terms of these changes. I don't, well, to call, to hive off half the population being murdered as a different category, I guess maybe that is a major change. These mandatory minimums, bringing in a new safety valve for that, that's, I guess, a major change. I don't see it as a enormous overhaul of the criminal code, though, in the way they're framing it, and I'm not sure
I
why they're
think it's
framing it in that way.
they're framing it that way, and it gets back to an argument I had with one of our daughters who was in women's studies at University of Victoria, and I was asking her, but this is like 20 years ago, like what is your course? Let me see, your the syllabus. And I looked at it and I said, well, how can you have a university course, the foundation of which is men are evil? And men should be discounted and they shouldn't be believed, etc. It goes on and on and on. Like, how can that be a university course? Because you're not studying all angles of the problem. You become doctrinaire, and it's ridiculous. But it's the extension of that line of thinking.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I was talking about a little bit of that in the lawful man talk I was given the other day, but I think that's changing a little bit too. Like 5 years ago, I think it would have been difficult to give a talk to men on legal issues because of the atmosphere, but that's changed a little bit now too. But yeah, there's still lots of women's studies courses out there, and so we'll see, Paula. I mean, this is it's not been passed yet. The opposition parties haven't made their views known, so there'll be study of all this, and so we'll see. But
But
yeah,
it's almost like Justin Trudeau is still in power.
well,
This
yeah,
is
in this
Justin
aspect of
Trudeau. It's a Justin Trudeau thing. This is what he'd been pushing for his 10 years in office. Um, doesn't you think Carney be a little sort of smarter and a little closer to the middle?
well, I'm waiting for that too, Paul, because there was a story this week, a little under the radar that Okay, so Sean Fraser is certainly he was a Trudeau minister and was going to retire when it looked like everybody was going to lose, and then Carney brought him back. Okay, but there was a story this week that Sean Fraser was making deals with the Parti Québécois on your religious exemption to hate speech law issue, and the story was that he was Fraser was sort of chastised by the Prime Minister's office because he hadn't passed it with the Prime Minister before making that deal with the Parti Québécois. So there may be the case that the PMO is looking a little closer at all of this and may take a different view than the minister. So we'll watch for that in the new year as well. All right, Paul, we've got yeah. Well, let's bring in Dave Moore.
Bring in Dave.
Yeah, we've got a great story to get to with Dave. So I'll look for.
This is going to be a story people are not going to, they're going to find it unbelievable, but it is believable. I checked it out.
All right. Well, there's Dave looking very thoughtful in his profile picture, and we'll see him in person here in a second. All right, back and forth. Hey, Dave,
Can you hear
Dave,
me?
we can hear you. We can't see you yet. We can see a version of you, but not the animated one.
There I am.
All right, there he is.
I can
Yes.
hardly tell the difference between the two of you there.
Welcome back to Dispersing the Fog, where you find out the rest of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Dave, let's in your previous show we were on, we discussed the first part of this, the Glen Assoun case, how you figured out Glen Assoun was an innocent man, that Michael McGray, the serial killer, may likely was the suspect in the murder of Brenda Way, for which Assoun was convicted. Then you were harassed by the RCMP. That's all in the previous show. And now this one, pick up what happened next, because the RCMP was not sort of at all happy with you.
Well, next door simultaneously, you're talking about the restaurant?
About your restaurant. I saw your restaurant back in the day after I first moved to Nova Scotia, right there on the beach. It was what, Moore's Landing.
Correct.
It looked like a very successful place, or relatively successful anyways. How successful was it?
Very successful. I think people need to know the real motivation behind that. So I'll tell the story from the beginning, if you will. I always, back from your neighborhood where you were from in Hamilton, at age 13, I participated with the JC's Burlington Town and Country Fair. You probably heard of that in
Yep.
its day. And my brother introduced me to activity in the community, and pretty much my whole life I've been involved in one way or the other with community, helping out where I live. So when I moved to Nova Scotia, one of the things I noticed was that the youth had no guidance. They were getting in trouble with the law, basically out of boredom and no direction, no goals in life. So in 1992, I introduced the Junior Achievement Program to Lower Sackville, Nova Scotia, and eventually became a graduate program where they could get credit for the program in the community. But basically, what that program entails is it's an entrepreneurial startup operation where you start a little business, you create a widget, you sell your widget, and then you close out the season. So what I found was I bolstered the enthusiasm in the students, and at the end of the season, they had no job for the summer. So I said, well, you know what? I could do this in real life. So in real life, I went out, looked in the area, and I found a derelict building on the coast of St. Margaret's Bay and Queensland Beach. And I took the initiative to rebuild the entire building using the same philosophy as I'd been teaching for years in junior achievement. So you would start the business up, take the money from the profits and plow it back into the business, and eventually grow the business to be successful.
Wait,
So
you're an RCMP officer at this time too.
correct. So I was doing things. I coached for 30 years. I was a coach in baseball all over the place, in Hubbards and in St. Margaret's Bay, in Bedford, in Halifax. I was also a baseball coach and a hockey coach. So I coached for 30 years throughout that. And really, that had nothing to do with the RCMP. It was just who I was as giving back to the community. But in this particular case, I wanted to show that you could do this program in real life. So I bought this property, fixed it up, and it just happened to reside, the business just happened to reside in what's called the Shatford Memorial Fund area. The Shatford Memorial Fund, if you're not familiar, is a fellow from Hubbards who went down to Texas in the 1920s, made his fortune in oil, and he had no living relatives, and he left it in a trust fund. So any person living within that geographical area could get free post-secondary education. So you could go to Harvard, you could go to any university, they'd put you up in the dorm, and many of the employees would be pushed towards that they wouldn't be aware of it at first, but if they worked hard, I'd introduce them to that program and they'd go on from there. So it was really, I was more a custodian of this property. The property had been there since 1842. It belonged, over the years, was originally a fish shack and then belonged to the Kennedy, Judge Kennedy, who also owned the Queensland Beach. And in 1971, his wife ran the restaurant as a canteen for the beach for 50 years. And in 1971, they turned over the property to the beach to become Queensland Park Provincial Beach, if you will, with this separate piece of property, which is a pre-Confederation property. Now, for those who don't know what pre-Confederation property is, it extends out under the water. It's not indoctrinated by index into the Confederation. So the Queen of England still had some venue into that property. They didn't annex the property there were 9 properties in Nova Scotia that fell under that. This was one of them. So it added a little bit of mystique to it, but basically I wanted to put the business back. So a lot of the local artists, I bought their products. One fella had ships in a bottle from Hubbards, and inside it was like walking into the galley of a ship. So everything was designed with rope and like you went back 100 years into the galley of a ship. The platters, Paul didn't know me at that time, but the captain's platters that served a gargantuan size of seafood were all platters from Kilnart that we served up at the business, and we catered to the local community, provided
Kilnart being us.
Correct. You didn't know it at the time, but we had 30 or 40 of your platters that we used to. So eventually the business grew, and we had 188 employees from 1995 until it burned down in 2003.
Wait, before you go on, or Adam, do you have any questions?
What? No, I'm looking to get into this. This is interesting stuff. I did have a question actually. Were there examples of people that were at the margins of this territory of free education that would then try to move inside? Like, did people
People
know
would
that?
actually move into the jurisdiction. It's quite large. It's not small. It's the whole town
Yeah.
of Hubbards and extended out to Queensland Beach. And they would move there knowing somebody has told them or they did the research to find out. And I actually had friends that moved in with their 3 kids into the
Yeah.
area
Think
so
of
that
it
they get their university pay. It was $450,000.
like the property
So
value there, exactly, right? It just goes up as a
engineers,
result.
architects, all went on to post-secondary education, all of it paid by the Shatford Memorial Fund.
All
Nobody,
right.
it went unnoticed, this fund, for 40, 50 years, and the money just kept accruing. There are
Yeah.
millions of dollars in the fund, and nobody was tapping into it.
Wow,
So
wow.
anyway,
Yeah.
Wait, next question that's important in the telling of the rest of the story. When you purchased the property, was there a deed? Was it a legal purchase? Was it registered? Was it vetted by the government? All the things. Was it done, above
yeah,
board 100%?
It was 100%. It was actually registered to a corporation. So I had to go through all the formalities of a corporation, registering the deed, processing the deed, setting up accounts, so on. And it didn't help, or sorry, it didn't hurt that the previous owner was Judge Kennedy. So they made sure they dotted the I's and crossed the T's. So it's a legitimate business. I still own the property to this day, but I've been fighting ever since the fire to get it reconstructed or do something with it. Really, I was only the custodian of this property for a short period of time since 1842, and rightfully it should be passed on for the enjoyment of the tourists and the Haligonians and the locals that they enjoyed it for many generations. Sadly, the joy of the property was overshadowed by this criminal across the street who perpetually caused damage to the property and eventually burned the place to the ground.
Before you get there, though, so you had in the Assoun case, they were coming after you. The RCMP was coming after you. Why do you think the RCMP had anything to do with the fire at your place?
Well, through that period of time, as I mentioned in the previous show, there were things happening to me that hadn't happened to me for nothing had occurred with this business for years. And all of a sudden, no parking signs were being put up on the property, on my property. The Department of Transportation was cheating on the road and paving the roadway over to my side door, taking 20, 30 feet of my property. What are you doing? They would disconnect my well in the middle of summer when I have 5,000 customers on the beach. What are you doing? So things were happening. It just made no sense whatsoever. And we're talking about an operation that's 8 years into the making. We're not talking about a startup that you did this or you did that. But the signs were pulled down at the business. I couldn't figure out who pulled the signs down. Finally, we end up having a meeting with the Department of Transportation. A couple of fake engineers showed up with false credentials, sat down with my attorney and said, "What do you want? Why are you doing this to me?" So, we don't have a problem with you. Well, if you want the property, buy it. Otherwise, leave me alone. I'm trying to run a successful business here.
How do you know they were fake or had false ID?
Well, two different ways. They presented their cards at the meeting. They laid them down on the table. And typical Dave Moore, I check into the background of people. And my experience in Nova Scotia is that there are an awful lot of people there that do not have their credentials that go with their judges that have never gone to law school, doctors that they're doing autopsies that never went to med school. What's going on here? So I took these, they were homemade cards, which was the most obvious thing. And they had PENG on the end of their name. So I called up PANS, that's a Society of Engineers. And I said, "Ever heard of these guys?" No. So these two clowns were presenting themselves with the city attorney and a DOJ attorney with my attorney at a meeting, and they weren't who they said they were. So how much validity could you put into whatever they were saying? So they had their agenda. And one example was they wanted me to make $60,000 worth of improvement to the property, change the entrance to the other side of the building, redo the existing building, which I did. I said, "Okay, if that gets you off my back, no problem." I did all this. Then in the midst of doing it, they put a stop work permit. What are you doing? You agreed that you were wanting me to do these things. We had architectural plans. You agreed to them. You signed off on them. Now you're calling the building inspector to stop this? So this went on for a while. And
Wait. I think Adam needs to, we got to slow you down here a bit. Adam,
Yes, these were not legitimate engineers, and they were
no,
demanding that you make an investment into your property, and you felt that you had to make that investment into your property nevertheless, even though they weren't legitimate. Is
yeah,
that
well, the fellow's name was Paul O'Brien, and he had got a CET, which is a certified engineer technician. It's basically a clerk
okay?
at DOT,
Yeah.
not a PENG. But I had it verified when I hired the restaurant burnt down. I hired Phil Collins, who was their chief civil engineer for the Department of Transportation for 30 years. And when I mentioned those two people's names, he said, "These are idiots. These are completely incompetent idiots that I've chased down my whole career to get." They keep signing off on projects and they have no authority to do so. I'm sitting there going, "Okay, here we go again. Politically appointed, connected to somebody." And anyway, they went on a rampage at the restaurant, and it almost seemed at that period of time that a number of things were happening. That the Department of Health came in. I passed with flying colors. It's a seasonal business, and every time you close it down and open it up, you clean it from stem to stern. It's spotless. So, and I knew this every year. So for 7, 8 years, again, every year it was spotless. And then all of a sudden, these guys show up from the health department. What? I passed the inspection last week. "Oh no, apparently you've got a problem with this." I do. So anyway,
so
one of the
you're being harassed, you think?
completely harassed. Like putting no parking signs on your property that you own. Excuse me? What are you doing? Oh, you're not allowed to have any parking there. Well, excuse me, you gave me the access permit to my property. I'm entitled to park on the edge of the road where my building is. But what they were doing was slowly moving in the asphalt surface. And again, this guy, Phil Collins, when he did the survey, he said, my God, they stole 26 feet of your property. The Department of Transportation kept moving the survey pegs over, which were completely improper. You were entitled, you were well within the right of way to have your building there. So anyway,
Well, okay, let's take you now, move along a bit here. Take me to the day before the fire. What you did. You sent me a note this week explaining this. The day before the fire, which was on what date?
so uh, in 2003, May 21st, 2003, there is a startup to the restaurant, which includes gearing up all your inventory, getting the place stripped down, cleaned out, reset up. And I had through Clearwater Lobster, their demonstration tanks were in my building. So I could set up a delivery from the local lobster fishermen for live lobster in the facility. That was one of the main things on the captain's platter. So we had taken a delivery of $42,000 worth of lobster to fill
That's
the
a
tank.
lot of lobster.
Yeah.
It's a lot of lobster and a lot of canned lobster that went into the freezer. So when the fire occurred, the first person who happened to be the insurance adjuster said, "There's no way this guy burnt his own place down. He's got a whole freezer full of lobster, and his tanks are all dead lobsters that were burned from the fire. Well, who in their right mind would spend $42,000 and then burn the restaurant down the next day?
No, you would have done it a few days before that.
And you also would have had insurance on your lobster.
Yes.
I didn't
Yeah.
have, right? So all those things, and it was ridiculous. But the fire marshal, Wayne Chapdelaine, was an auxiliary with the Tantallon RCMP, and he went on a rampage in the media saying, I burnt down my restaurant, I was negligent. Excuse me? I also, there had been an upgrade in the fire retardant material, the CO2 cartridge in the restaurant, and I had it installed 2 days before the fire.
So
That was
did
also
they, did they, Dave, have a specific theory about how you burned the place down, or were they just
no, nothing. They just said I was
Same.
negligent, that I had done this, I had done that, and I was just shaking my head. The number of offenses that were going up against this property by the guy across the street were so obvious to anybody that cared to look. He tried to burn it down once before. He put gasoline in the stovepipe of the fireplace and let it on fire. And so I had a previous fire at the restaurant, and it was from the conversion that DOT asked for to put the entrance on the other side. So anyway, getting off track there a little bit, but basically it was so easy to figure out that this guy was involved in it from the number of complaints that he had lodged and the fact that the police
Okay. Okay,
Go ahead.
before you go on there, like you're looking at this guy across the road who's you say is a criminal.
Yeah.
Why is he not doing this, burning your place down just to get a better view of St. Margaret's Bay? And why would you suspect he was working in concert with the RCMP? It sounds kind of bizarre.
Well, the number of complaints that went in prior to the fire against him they seemed to refuse to investigate. And one of them included the installation of a video camera in a transformer across the street. A little bit of time before the fire, I had complained so much they thought they should do something. So they put a camera in the transformer across the street, which caught the neighbor coming across the street at 5:30 in the morning. And he was pounding on the propane tanks with a hammer and a screwdriver. He was tampering with the regulators on the top of the propane tanks. So I heard the ping. I was upstairs sleeping and I went to look out. Sure enough, I could identify him. I knew exactly who he was. And I yelled at him to get the hell out of there. So he ran across the street, went back into his house. That was all visible on video. So the next day I called the police down. I said, I want this guy charged. I want at least a restraining order against this individual. He's been causing me nothing but grief. So the Crown prosecutor.
You're still a Mountie at this point.
I'm still a Mountie, yeah.
And it's your detachment.
Great. And well, I shouldn't say that. When I bought the restaurant, I was working in Tantallon. I took a transfer to Lower Sackville. So I was never in a conflict of interest of having to police an area where I owned a business. So I took the video or had the video looked at by the police department and the Crown prosecutor, and they advised that there was insufficient evidence. Excuse me? I'm the primary. I saw him. I observed him. I identified him. He
And
ran
there's
across the
video.
street.
And there's
And
video.
you have a video independent that corroborates what I'm telling you.
Wow, that's
No,
that's
didn't
gold
prosecute.
evidence. That's golden
Didn't
evidence,
prosecute.
Dave. Yeah,
Yeah,
you
didn't
yeah.
prosecute. So I end up calling them. McGuire was in charge of Lower Sackville. Are you going to wait till he kills me before you do something? What the hell is going on here? I can't go out and police in another community, save people's lives and do their things, investigate, and you can't even protect my back door. So, I'm not getting involved in it. It's Hatfield and McCoy. Excuse me? Hatfield and McCoy. Are you retarded? Get off your ass and do your police work. Well, a number of people went forward to the police department, and this guy was going around the community bragging that he was going to burn the restaurant down weeks in advance. So I had those people go to the RCMP in Tantallon and tell their story. Bill Jones, that person he was talking to at the bar, he was bragging to everybody. Oh, I'm friends with the cops. I'm going to go burn the restaurant down. So lots of foreshadowing of the events that occurred. What was the real key was the fire was there were a number of explosions in the fire. The propane tanks that were on the deck that heated the restaurant in the evening, they were caught up in the fire and they blew up like hand grenades. So there was sparks, and it was an extremely windy day, and it blew the flames of a 2-story building across the street and caught the roof on fire of the drug dealer criminal's house. Oh. So he sues me and takes me to court and wants his $2 million for his $50,000 house. And during the course of this civil proceeding with my insurance, he leans over and tells because his Irish lawyer was getting upset with him and said, well, I burned the restaurant down. I should be entitled to get rebuilt. And the lawyer snapped and said, excuse me? He put up his hand, recused himself, says, I can no longer represent my client. He just admitted that he burnt the restaurant down.
He said that on the record, Dave?
On record, yeah. So during his testimony, he said that he was an employee of Sobeys in Tantallon, and he had worked there. And that's when he received the phone call for the burning down of the restaurant. So this guy's a pathological liar. So I couldn't get the police to do anything for me. So I actually did my own criminal investigation, and I was able to speak to the manager at Sobeys. They had fired him 8 months before because he was unsanitary and hard to deal with. And so then the next question came. They gave the phone number of the cell phone that he received the phone call on, supposedly during his testimony. When I ran the ping on that cell phone, the ping came back to the Hubbards tower. There's a tower immediately behind Sobeys up on the hill, and there's another one in Hubbards, and it rang off the ping at the Hubbards tower during the fire. He was there at the scene at the time of the fire.
The next thing to the phone records.
Yeah.
Pardon me? How could you investigate a ping without a search warrant?
Well, fortunately for me, I have friends that work within phone companies, and I just asked them, can you check this? I didn't check the phone number itself at first. I just checked, is there any way if you could chase whether the ping came off this tower or that tower? And the guy told me it came off the Hubbards tower. So then I said, can you tell me what the phone number is? And I want to make sure it matches the one that was in the court proceedings. So when I did that, it turned out that it was a phone used, a disposable burner phone used by HRP and Halifax RCMP for the informants. So I ran that on the system when I went back to work, and it came back that phone number was used during a Hell's Angel operation. Somebody was calling in information on that phone. So somebody was using the burner number and was obviously tied in as an informant to the police department, which goes back to the guy across the street. So those are direct connections, and that's what solidified. That was the gut-wrenching betrayal that became obvious to me that the arsonist was involved with the RCMP and the Halifax Regional Police, and they set out and were DOJ Nova Scotia, who were the people with video protecting him all along. All the crimes he was committing on that property were being protected by the police department. So,
Adam,
They gave the arsonist a burner phone.
yeah.
Oh,
So
great.
dummy. Yeah. So Jeff Winters it was the person from Halifax Regional who was the carrier of that cell phone account. And that's the same. He's when you have an undercover person, you have somebody who's going to carry them, going to be the responder to them, and then you pass that information up the line. Um, so my
last one.
question for Adam is this. Perhaps I can ask Adam to explain to me what should happen to an informant who continually breaks the law. It's a question that Adam could offer, being involved as a lawyer.
Well,
What
sure.
should have happened there?
Oh, well, they shouldn't be used as an informant anymore. That's the first thing. You know, anybody taking advantage of the situation like that for their own ends, but they can be charged. I mean, there's no immunity as a result of being an informant in any way. There's no legal immunity, certainly. There may be the police may feel compelled to protect the person, but not for independent crimes. I mean, if he has to do something in the course of informing, all right, he's possessed drugs because he's there doing a drug deal. What? Okay, all right, maybe you look past that, but something completely disconnected from, or was it disconnected? I guess
Well, this
was it
guy, Patrick
disconnected from what
McKenzie,
the
was well
assignment
known
was?
to be a criminal in Lower Sackville. He was on the system, chronic complainer. The other thing that I was able to track was that an Inspector Dan Tanner had a number of phone calls from that same cell phone within days before the fire and days after the fire. Is the inspector from the RCMP the one guiding this person? You had a previous guest on, Paul, who said there was no difference between an agent and an informant. The RCMP pretty much tell them what they're looking for and what to do. So, in the bag of dirty tricks from 1972, and the RCMP told them to go in and burn the friggin' barn down in Quebec, how is this any different? They had full knowledge all along of all the stuff this guy was doing, and they just shielded him. DOJ is complicit. The other thing was, during the civil trial, DOJ Catherine Lunn was present in the courtroom when the lawyer stood up and said, my client just admitted he burned the restaurant down. Shouldn't that trigger a criminal investigation on the part of DOJ attorneys for arson and attempted murder of a police officer? Hello?
Adam.
Well, that's exactly right. Catherine Lunn was involved in the Desmond inquiry on the provinces. But yeah, when they hear that you were in the building, you could have been killed.
Yeah, family
So
was there.
what was the end of this operation from the RCMP's perspective? Was there any other possibility besides let's annoy Dave more until he stops bothering us?
Well, the interesting thing was when I returned, I had bad lung inhalation. I had to run through the building to find my kids and get them out of the burning fire. And so I took a couple of days off work to try and organize my thoughts. I went back to work, and Ken Bradley, the same guy that was causing me all kinds of grief with the Assoun case, the minute I get in the office, you deserve everything that happened to you. You pushed too hard. You should shut your mouth. The other Kevin Tallenbeck, sergeant from Halifax Regional, that was there, startled himself to his feet, pushed his desk away, assuming I was going to punch the living shit out of Ken Bradley for his comments. My family almost died in that fire. What are you doing? So how would this guy have made those kind of comments unless he was aware of exactly what was going on there?
Yeah,
That's
no,
too
no.
close to what the issue was. Too close to the Assoun matter, too close to the destruction of evidence, too close to how far the RCMP would go to shut somebody up. Maybe it got out of control. Maybe they didn't intend for that. They just wanted to scorch the property. But the end result was some people almost got killed here. So if the RCMP is not going to protect one of their own members and is prepared to kill one of their own members for the sake of an informant, it reminds me of Sammy the Bull Gravano, that he did 52 murders down in New York, and they wanted to let him off the 52 murders if he would testify against the Silicon Don there, John Gotti.
Gotti, yeah.
So he goes
Tough
into
on
witness
Don.
protection for the length of time, and then he buggers off and goes back to being a criminal again. So you're sitting
Okay,
there going, go ahead, Paul.
couple of questions here. One, last week when we were talking to Kurt Petrovich, we talked about Sergeant Peter Montague at Gustafson Lake back in the 90s, same era, talking about smearing was one of the smearing people was what the RCMP did best. So, you clearly seem to be part of a smear campaign over a number of issues. Secondly, the people involved, you've mentioned a few names. These are the same people who were involved in other controversies that we talked about during this time. Tom Juby dealt with the very same people in the Swiss Air investigation, which he said was a cover-up. Uh,
McGuire was in charge of Swiss Air. He was a lunatic on site. Couldn't deal with him, couldn't manage him. Uh, Dan Tanner was the inspector of CIB, shut
that's
down
right.
every
So these are all the same
same
people.
people,
That
same
during the
people.
same period, we had serial killers, McGray and Johnson, Andrew Johnson, running around Nova Scotia, and no one's on them. These are the guys in charge at the time. You knew about them. You were figuring it out. You were one of them. Um, it just seemed like a really bad sort of era. No one was held accountable, but then it continued on for the next 20 years, right through the force. This sort of attitude of smearing people, doing things that are sort of, if not illegal, immoral or unethical. So
Absolutely.
why did they go after you? And what was the outcome of all this?
I think primarily I was a standalone person. Before I joined the force, I had an occupation. I don't have it tattooed on my rear end. And I took a 75% cut in pay to join the RCMP to go along with their guise of advancement into the future. Once I got in and started it, I was at 24 funerals, 24 members' funerals, having committed suicide. Over what? And some of these people, unlike me, I could have left any time and gone on to do any number of things. But some of these people were so badly committed to the organization that when they were betrayed, they took their own lives. They weren't guilty of anything. They just couldn't cope. They had no other mechanism. So I would have liked to have gotten to them early, and I have since that time. Members have called me in desperation, and I've helped them out prior to them committing suicide. So there is a full circle to this, but I believe that at first I thought it was only a few people. Unfortunately, it's a group of them that seem to think they're above the law, that the rest of us are all stupid, that we never are going to be able to figure out or point the finger back at them for their crimes, really. They're corrupt officers. And whenever you're dealing with an informant, it's a two-edged sword. You better be careful what you say and how you manage that, because he'll turn against you in a nanosecond. He'll go to other police departments and get multiple compensation from them. He'll tell the Hells Angels what he's telling the police department, and be a two-way player. So you can't embrace an informant. And certainly if they start breaking the law all over the place, you've got to shut them down. They are not part of your team. They're going to take the administration of justice and throw it in the toilet. And the RCMP is going to just disintegrate once people find out that they were involved right from the beginning. So in my case, I was shaking my head trying to figure out, like, I had firsthand contact with the department telling them, what are you going to wait till I'm killed before you do something about this? What's going on here? How badly is it that I've offended you that you're going to do this to one of your own members? It was disgusting. That particular inspector was a crook. He was an undercover cop. He's a pathological liar. He got caught up in a number of testimonies that were completely false early on in his career. He had zero credibility, and they buried him in Nova Scotia. And yet here he goes up to his old tricks again. So it was obvious to everybody involved who Dan Tanner was and what his activities were. He was a senior member of the force, came to me to tell me that Tanner had been extorting him for months, that the whole gaming setup was a complete sham. It was a Hollywood setup. The car had a tracking device on it. The phones were tapped. The boss in charge of it was the
What are
guy.
you talking about here? I don't understand what you're talking about.
What I'm saying is the extent to which the RCMP will go to shut somebody up. They took me out of the unit, but they set up the other unit. Was a full scam right from the beginning. The boss of that unit came to me and said, Tanner set me up. He's extorting me over an issue down in Yarmouth. I have to come here and I have to take you out. That's the whole point of it. He'll
That's
let me
another
out the-
that's another story, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
geez.
he went on. He came to my house. He asked me to come outside the house because he knew my house was bugged. He said, "Come outside. I want to talk to you. I can't handle this
Who is
anymore."
bugging your house?
The RCMP.
How do you know?
Well, I confirmed it later on from an ident member in J Division who said that they were involved with Special I from New Brunswick. Dan Tanner used to be in New Brunswick. So the local RCMP, I worked in the Shannon Park office right beside Special Operations. So I asked them point blank, are you installing these bugs? Nope, nothing to do with it. Where's the information to obtain? Should be hanging off the wall. We have nothing to do with it, Dave. So that told me that Tanner brought somebody in from outside. He used to be in J Division. Sure enough, I got contacts over there too. They confirmed that it was J Division's operation that set up the wiretap and the bugs. Okay, house was bugged, office was bugged, and my car that was in the unit had a tracking device on it. And my boss, he confirmed it at first, but he was sending me on all these odd jobs. I want you to take the car and drive to the Indian reservation near Yarmouth and turn around and get some gas and come all the way back. Every day he would send me on a no good assignment. He didn't want me to talk to anybody. He knew that they were setting me up. And at one point, I had rented out the plot of land to a chip truck on Queensland. So one day I decided at lunchtime I'd go get a PT Cruiser from the Chevrolet Chrysler dealership at the corner, Shannon Park, and drive out there. So I drove out there, never left the car, had the top down, went to see how he was doing. And when I came back, the boss had said to me, the same boss who came to see me said, Tanner called me, said to arrest you for taking your gun and pointing it at the head of the guy across the street. Excuse me? So he said, well, I'm not taking action because you didn't have your gun with you. I have the key to the gun locker and your gun's in the locker.
Well.
I can't take this anymore, but we got to talk, but not here. So he was being drawn into a setup by his corrupt cop. And I don't know what it was about me. I'm a pretty straight shooter. I don't need the money. Swear to God. I could go get a job tomorrow. I'm working in AI field right now. And you're sitting there going like, why are you doing this? You don't have to do this. Whatever their causation, somehow they convinced everybody at DOJ that I was some dirty cop. Believe me, I have no reason. I can make money 8 ways from Sunday. I don't need to be in any other facet of work, illegally or otherwise. So to try and figure out the rationale of why they do things and why they dig in deep, my thing is it's like a rumor mill. They're all armchair investigators that never find out for themselves. They just rumors. The boss told me that's what it is. Oh, it must be what it is. And they go around and you're not part of the club anymore. So everybody's got to take a shot at you.
Well,
if you understood the motivation behind the restaurant, you'd understand. I didn't draw a dime from that restaurant. I gave it all back to the community, every bit of it. And every bit of it burned in the fire.
So yeah, Dave, we're getting to the end of our time here, but I think that that kind of puts a little bow on the story. I mean, this is incredible, really. I think the viewers and the listeners are going to be fascinated by all of this because it's amazing to hear the extent to which the RCMP would put effort into, undermining one of their own.
Here's a small example. My building was fired into, bullets from across the street, at the same time Daryl Dexter's house was shot into, back a few years ago.
He was the premier of Nova Scotia.
He was the premier of Nova Scotia. He had 52 police officers respond to that call. It took 3 years before an RCMP officer came out to see me about the bullets fired. I had a bullet lodged in the back taillight of my car, and I had several bullets in the signage 18 feet up in the air, which had to come directly across the street from the second story of the building across the street. There was a plexiglass surface, a 9-inch aluminum box, and the hole went straight through and put a dent in the back of the box. That tells you the trajectory is straight. It's not coming up at an angle. It's coming from straight. What's straight across the street? The second story of his A-frame home. He's firing into my bedroom with bullets, and the police will not respond.
So Dave, oh, sorry, go ahead, Paul.
Well, I think we should make it clarify here. You've said some very critical things of retired Inspector Dan Tanner. But Dan Tanner has come up as I said, in Swiss Air. I've heard a lot about him. I have a lot of documents about Dan Tanner. Irregardless of what you said, he's not here to defend himself. He may have another side of the story. And after he retired, he went on to become the manager of security services at Halifax Airport for about 6 years. And then he became the president of the Royal United Services Institute of Nova Scotia, which is some think tank on defense and stuff like that. So he managed to go on and have it seems a credible career. How do you explain that?
Well, he's got some pretty dark shadows hanging in his closet. If you had sat and down with that sergeant from my gaming unit and listened to what Tanner was involved in, you can't have any other label for that guy other than corrupt. There's
Well,
no question. I'm entitled to my opinion. Dan Tanner, you want to come after me? You come, because I have all kinds of evidence against you, buddy. I can't stand the man, but if it's like putting your hands up in a Nazi gathering. I don't like what's going on here. How long do you think you're going to last? You won't make it out of the room alive. And that's what it was like trying to complain in the organization about Dan Tanner. He is the centerpiece of all of the illegitimate activity that took place in Nova Scotia. He is a problem master manipulator, and I'm not the only officer to step up. Many officers have stepped forward and said, this guy's a piece of work. Well, maybe if you're an honest cop, you got to find some dirty ways to take down an honest cop, because you're not going to do it trying to set me up. It's not going to happen. There was an incident that occurred when I was at gaming, and a superintendent from Halifax Regional and a superintendent from the RCMP, Ferguson, meet up to do a road check at the lower side of Dartmouth near the Tim Hortons. I was told the day before to take a Coleman cooler. This is at the time Danny from Tantallon was charged with drug trafficking. I am told, I'm in the gaming unit, somehow they received this Coleman cooler, green over white top, with a load of drugs in it. So there's a note on my desk. Both bosses disappear the next morning. I come in early. But before I start my day, I go get a Tim Hortons coffee, come down and lay out my agenda for the day. I am to take those drugs down to the incinerator in Dartmouth to have the drugs burned. So it's all taped up. I open it up. Typically, you'd have an exhibit report and a Department of Health report. You send a sample away to the Department of Health that tells you what that drug is that's contained in that container. And those two documents have to go along with that sample. None of them are there. So I do not take the cooler, but I go get my coffee. Here's the two superintendents in uniform pulling me over at a road check and looking inside my private vehicle. They're looking in the back hatch. Where's the cooler? It's not there. So I go up, go through the drive-through, grab a coffee. I come back. They disappeared, gone. So I come back and my boss, I said, what the hell did you just try to do? The next day when he came in, I'm not moving a load of drugs. Jesus Christ, you think I'm stupid after what happened in Tantallon? And he started crying. A grown man. He knew they were setting me up.
And you're not the first. You're not the first.
But they're trying to take away your credibility by using crimes. It's like, I have nothing to do with drugs. I could care less. I don't need it to make money. I make my own money, apartment buildings, whatever, real estate. I don't need their bloody nonsense. So they picked the wrong guy. You're not going to get me that way. And if you're an honest cop, you're not going to be gotten at all because you can see right through it. But then for weeks after that, that superintendent. I'm going to suspend you for this. I'm going to suspend you for that. I'm going to fire you for this. Excuse me? Who the hell are you? Well, put all those pieces together, and it's all near the Assoun case, all within a week of the Assoun case or 2 weeks after I get back from my holidays. Come on. You'd have to be a blind man to see it. So, anyway,
That's
Well,
pretty
good.
that's
sad. Pretty sad.
well,
That's all I can say.
Dave, you've given us in the audience a lot to chew on there. So we want to thank you again for taking the time to spend with us and enlighten us on what's taking place. It's pretty startling.
Well, I sent a message to Tim Houston, who I know very well, and I said, Tim, I'm trying to tell you, you have corruptions within your ranks, and you've got to sort it out. Your leadership is good. I like what you're doing, but you can't turn a blind eye to the past of what's going on there. There's too many things that you need to be aware of and take care of before you go forward. He's got some great ideas, but you can't just have a straightforward, go forward idea and forget about the past. Those people are still working in the rank and file of government. They're going to undermine every step you take, despite the good nature of who he is and what he wants to do. So I'm just trying to open his eyes. He probably already knows, didn't need to hear it from me. He's a pretty smart guy, but you're sitting there going, come on, you've got to clean this up before you move forward. Why would you take away employment in a have not area of the province? 188 employees.
Mhm.
188. Can any community, small town afford to lose somebody like that? I don't think so. Anyway, leave it for another day. How's not the question why, but certainly people need to know the rest of the story. You know, Paul Harvey, now you know the rest of the story. People always ask me, whatever happened to your restaurant? Hmm. Oh, would you like to know the rest of the story?
We'll be
Well,
back. I know you have more to talk about another time.
here's here's dispersing the fog with the rest of the story.
Yeah.
Thank you
There you
once
go.
again.
Thank
Thanks a
you,
lot, Dave.
Dave. It's been great.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye for
Bye.
now. Well, all right, Paul. That was yeah, that is something. Like they went after him relentlessly.
But he's not the only one. They've done
Yeah.
this to members right across the country, continue to do it. There's a $1 billion lawsuit outstanding now for their harassment. And you've got governments like Nova Scotia saying, we're going to go with the Mounties because we trust them to do the job the best. This is deep inside what's going on. It's really disturbing, and it needs to be dealt with.
Well, if anybody wants to come on and tell the other side of the story and their view, get in touch. We might give you some airtime.
But yeah, if Dan Tanner wants to come on, we'd like to hear his story, um, his side of the story. We might have some tough questions for him.
Yeah,
Um, but the other thing, it gets down to a little aside before we go here.
yeah.
The media, talk about the media. Why does the media not cover stories? Um, what's going on? The YVR, they can't. Oh well, it's someone else's story. Like they made a product, and we don't want to match their product. They're not treating it as news. But on the other side of it is, I look at my books. Going back to my books, a funny thing happened yesterday where um, I saw a story in the Nova Scotia papers, CBC, Nova Scotia, where CBC and all the media in Nova Scotia have ignored my books, even though the last two went to instant number ones, never wrote anything about them. Even though we made allegations about, who shot Corey Ellison, uh, Heidi Stevenson's gunfight didn't happen, Wertman was executed, bringing up legitimate stories. Nothing written about it, but they had a story on Friday about someone in Cape Breton. Did I send you that story?
Oh, Tom Urbaniak, right?
Yes, Tom Urbane. What was that story about? What book was that story about?
The pressing issue of how to celebrate Polish Christmas in the Polish tradition.
There you are.
Yeah.
That was a big story. How to celebrate Polish Christmas in Cape Breton. Lovely story about
Lovely.
a book that seven people are going to read.
Yeah,
You
it's not going to upset anybody to read that article.
Yeah, but you can't get legitimate things covered. It's insane.
A slight example of that, Paul, and just something we're looking forward to, I think, is this story out of Fredericton. Homicides there, five accused on three homicides that were, um,
Yeah.
the cases were dropped. It brought in an Ontario lawyer, this Ian Scott, to do a review. There was insurmountable evidentiary error in which nobody will explain. The police are apologizing. They won't say what they're apologizing for. No consequences to anybody. The officer involved apparently is retired now, and they won't even reveal the 19 recommendations that this lawyer from Ontario has made. But they're very contrite and they're all these things, but they won't tell us why.
Yep.
So back to the same old habits.
And then the other story that caught my eye was the 1955 murder of Glen Rusk in Halifax, and CBC did a big story. Mysterious Halifax murder case turns 70. Victim's family asked police for more information. Geez, if they read Frank magazine 5 or 6 years ago, Bev Ketty, before he died, did a wonderful story on who did it. I've written about it in my books. It was the former police chief for Dunn Mitchell is the prime suspect. He committed suicide 60 years ago when they were closing in on him, and no one will admit it was the former police chief. And CBC leaves that out because it doesn't want to credit Frank with anything.
No, no, you wouldn't want
No.
that. Or Paul Palengo. Well, listen, I'll give you credit, Paul. It was another great show, and we'll be back next week. We'll do one more before Christmas, I guess, and give people something to listen to over the holiday break, catch up on old episodes and all those great things. So, anything else before we leave here?
Last thing, this week I've been savoring what has become my favorite Christmas song,
What's this now?
"Father Christmas" by the Kinks.
All right.
You know it?
Oh, yes,
He's
yes, I
the
do know that
store,
one.
the department store Santa Claus who gets beat up by a bunch of poor kids. In typical Ray Davies fashion. Father Christmas, they said to the Santa Claus, Father Christmas, give us some money. Don't mess around with those silly toys.
Yeah.
We'll beat you up if you don't hand it over. We want your bread, so don't make us annoyed.
Oh,
Give
wow.
give all the toys to the little rich boys.
Something fun to listen to.
Just fun, clever,
Yeah.
and unlike much of today's music, thoughtful, satirical. A study came out this week. Today's music is sad and simple compared to decades past. And Father Christmas is my example of how wonderful the things were in the past.
All right. Well, let's go out on that note. I'm more of a Kenny and Dolly Christmas guy myself, but I like that one too. The Kinks are great. All right,
See,
Paul. Well, thanks for the show. Thanks everybody for watching, and thanks for listening. And we'll see you next time.
see you later.